Now she's bringing her faith into fashion and the hijab onto the high street. The Muslim designer and blogger Hana Tajima has teamed up with the leading multinational clothing chain Uniqlo to create a clothing collection based around modesty. Already a success in Asia, it's launching in British stores this spring. It includes hijabs in a range of edgy designs and colours, aimed not at a minority, but the mainstream. Our social affairs editor Jackie Long went to meet her, and a warning, there is flash photography from the very beginning.
There's just a different version of beauty. I think the beauty that we see in the fashion industry is a highly sexualized version of that.
Half Japanese, half English, a Muslim convert and fashion designer. Hana Tajima defies easy definition, and that's what she wants her clothes to do too.
What I've been trying to do with my designs is to create sort of a crossover. It's a bridge between what a Muslim woman would want to wear and just clothing in general. So I mean, my aesthetic is based around the Muslim aesthetic, but at the same time it's come from a place that's very much more abstract than that. It contains a lot of other elements.
She was commissioned by the international clothing giant Uniqlo to design a mainstream collection including hijabs for a growing Muslim market in Asia. It will now launch in the UK in March.
There'll be many conservative Muslims who find the very idea of fashion and Islam as being a total contradiction, a notion of making yourself more attractive, which in essence is how we view fashion, isn't it?
Fashion, it's typically considered ostentatious or flashy, or you want to be noticed, but when it comes to style, it's very much an expression of who you are, and in Islam that's a positive thing, to be able to express yourself that way.
But Hana, who started life as a blogger modelling her own designs, accepts that the way she expresses herself is not always met with universal approval.
On your website, there's a picture of you sort of half lying on a sofa. That struck me as quite a, not a provocative image, but an image that I think might get you into some difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, I'm just like a person doing things that I think are interesting, so there's definitely going to be things that people disagree with or find offensive. Through what I'm doing, it's what I want to express, this certain idea of what my idea of beauty is and how that can be merged. But yeah, I mean, it's fine if people don't like what I'm doing. I think
Hana was 17 and living in Taunton in Somerset when she decided to become a Muslim and began to wear the hijab.
Do you understand why many people, many women particularly, find that idea that it's liberating very odd? Do you understand that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand that, and I think we've definitely grown up in a society where liberation comes with sort of shortening hems and things like that. Whether you choose to wear a shorter skirt or you choose to show your body, the choice is the liberation. So the choice to cover my body and the choice to show my body or show different parts of my body to different people is liberating.
While Hana's collection is about breaking down barriers between Muslim and non-Muslim clothes, the hijab is, after all, she says, just a piece of cloth. She's acutely aware of how in daily life it's often viewed very differently.
Every time something bad happens, if there's like a terror attack or something like that, you know immediately that there's going to be this sort of wave of suspicion that maybe you won't sort of travel on certain public transport for a day or two, or I mean, it's not necessarily a personal attack. You feel it in the air. You feel sort of a general sort of air of suspicion. I mean, it's the same kind of thing as if you're going through airport security and you know you're fine and you haven't done anything wrong, but you still get that sense of like, oh no, what am I like somehow guilty? Have I like done something that I don't realize that I've done? It's that same kind of feeling that you can't put your finger on it, but you sort of feel it.
Hana says the UK is one of many countries behind the curve in recognising just how big a market there is among Muslim women. But she's also hoping her clothes will have a much wider audience too.
I think it's going to just take sort of clever marketing or some sort of trigger to help people disassociate from the the label of, oh, this is Islamic clothing, it's not for me, and being like, oh, okay, it's just clothes, I could probably wear this looks nice. It is projected to be such a huge industry, and because it isn't at the moment, there's a sort of race to see who gets there first, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out.
Who's that? She can be
So is the fact global brands from Dolce & Gabbana to Uniqlo have begun to include the hijab in their mainstream fashion lines a good thing, or is it capitalising on faith? Here to discuss that, the model Maria Idrissi, who was the first hijab-wearing woman to appear in an advert for another leading high street fashion chain, H&M, and the writer Ruqayyah Harris. How do you feel about this?
I mean, I think it's great that, modest Muslim fashion is being included as long as Muslim women themselves are being included, as long as it's not kind of, recently we have D&G kind of capitalising on Muslim fashion without really kind of empowering Muslim women themselves. I mean, there's tons of Muslim designers, Muslim models and bloggers and all these kinds of things. And I think they need to be empowered because they've been at the forefront of Muslim fashion for a long time. So I think it's important that mainstream high fashion does actually kind of pay attention to that.
Why? Where were they going wrong?
With D&G? I mean, I think, firstly, maybe using a Muslim model. I think including more Muslims in the production of it. I think, personally, in my opinion, I don't think it was, a particularly amazing, groundbreaking kind of collection. I didn't love it, but I think that really speaking to Muslim designers and people in the Middle East that are actually wearing these things that are clearly the target audience, actually might have, improved the collection. So,
Maria, what do you make of those concerns?
So I can agree to a certain extent. I do feel with the model they use, it's not so much, I don't agree with whether she has to be a Muslim or not. It's the idea of obviously putting a hijab on someone representing Islam, because whatever her religious beliefs, it's not really showing through. So, because we know it's aimed at a certain demographic. So I think in terms of using, however, a model from a particular demographic to attract those people, that definitely I could say, obviously she wasn't Middle Eastern from my understanding, I could be wrong.
But is there a historical tradition of fashion and style with hijabs and Islamic dress for women in general? Or is this a Western, constraint put on Islam?
I mean, yes, traditionally, Muslim women have been, very much into their high fashion, especially in this region, in the Gulf, that, presumably this is the target kind of audience. So there's a huge fashion market there. So I think, I would...
But is that a new thing, or has that always been there?
I think that's always been the case. It might not be, historically throughout the history of Islam, but obviously, in a more kind of consumer-driven time, that's definitely been there for decades at least.
Because a lot of people might be a bit confused. To outsiders, the hijab is a thing of modesty.
Yeah.
It's a thing actually to sort of stop drawing attention to yourself.
Yeah.
If you're suddenly wearing bright colours or edgy designs or patterns,
yeah,
aren't you attracting attention? Isn't that what you're not supposed to do?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Again, there is definitely becoming a very blurred line between modesty and extravagance and beauty and extravagance. So a lot of the time, I do feel with Muslim women today, especially like you can see online, they use the idea, a verse from the Quran where it states that God loves beauty and so we should be beautiful, which is true. But again, there is a very blurred line now between beauty and extravagance. And that is something that we should really understand, because obviously with a lot of the time, I'm not perfect, I have to stress this, but a lot of the time there is definitely a point where we do feel, is that really considered hijab anymore? And of course now with major, brands, tapping into this market.
Ruqayyah, what's your take on that? I mean, should we read anything into the fact that you're wearing black?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think modesty is a very subjective thing, and I think it's something that manifests very differently for a lot of people. For most people, it's about covering kind of certain areas. For most Muslim women. But I do think, at the same time, it's difficult in this society. It's difficult to pay no attention to how you look. It's difficult to not care about fashion, to not wear makeup. All these things are, they're hard.
So. I mean, Hana drew a distinction between fashion and style, suggesting that fashion is drawing attention to yourself and is frivolous and bad, whereas style is something that's always been the case. I mean, do you buy that distinction?
Yeah, I think there definitely is a distinction, but I think even in terms of fashion, we are allowed to take pride in how we look. And I think obviously, you know, there are kind of different perceptions of what it means to really be modest and not draw any attention to yourself. But at the same time, you know, we're allowed to look good. We're allowed to, you know, take pride in that. And I think having these Muslim designers that are, you know, working with modesty, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Where do you think it goes from here?
I think from here, the problem is right now with the whole D&G thing is that, again, Muslims are saying that they are capitalizing on something that is ours. But when it comes to Nando's or KFC supplying us with halal meat, no one complains. Everyone's happy to eat there. When it comes to, you know, Islamic banking being brought in by major companies with HSBC, no one complains. Everyone stays quiet. But when it comes to fashion, it becomes a really touchy subject. And a lot of the time, it does come from designers. And I can totally see their point where it is unfair. They've put in all the work and they've kind of made themselves the forefront of Islamic modest fashion, and then all of a sudden, major label comes along.
We must leave it there. Maria Idrissi, Ruqayya Harris, thank you both.